So I'm gonna give them a C plus because their defense sucks. Josh Allen has to carry that team. I don't trust their receivers. And it's really just James Cook and Josh Allen. If you can stop one of them, the other guy is middled as well. So I just don't trust this team moving forward. I give them a C plus.
Yeah, I give them an F because what the hell, man? Vegas told me this team was going to be undefeated. I mean, coming into the year, you were favored in every single game, and then you're 2-5 versus the spread. What is that about? And then you not only beat Baltimore, which is now proving to have one of the worst defenses in the league, you beat Miami, you beat the Saints, and then you beat the Panthers, and then was it the Jets too?
Yeah, the Jets.
And then now you're already behind against the Patriots, and then how about you blew your entire Super Bowl window? Great. Now you're not even the best team in your division anymore. You get an F.
Yeah, you've lost your window. So that leads us to the last team to cover, the Patriots. Talk about a team that was 4-13 last year. You get Mike Vrabel, you sign a bunch of players on defense, you go out and get Stephon Diggs. And outside of a couple of lost opportunities against the Raiders and Steelers, this team has beaten everybody in front of them. In the last 2 weeks, they've blown out the Titans and Browns. They have to get an A plus. They're one of the biggest surprise teams in the NFL. And Drake Maye is an MVP candidate. What else besides an A plus do the Patriots deserve?
Yeah, A for awards because he might get most improved player, potentially comeback player of the year, with Stephon Diggs coming back from injury, and then you have he actually came back from something other than Daniel Jones. Who came back just from sucking. He actually came back from an injury. And then Mike Vrabel potentially could win Defensive Player of the Year. And then you could have Drake Maye in the running for Offensive Player of the Year, potentially Kayshon Boutte for Most Improved Player this year. I don't even know a word.
Yeah. Yeah, Patriots, they've been the biggest surprise in the NFL outside of maybe the Colts. They look like a wagon. They've won 5 straight games. They're the hottest team in the NFL. And now we have Drake May in the MVP conversation, fourth in MVP odds, which is a good way to segue into the mid-season awards. But we have given our grades for all teams through the first 8 weeks of the season. Make sure to check us out.
Of a show so far, and we still have a lot more to cover here, going over our mid-season awards and previewing all the other games. So definitely a huge show here, and let's start out kind of just going over the coach of the year so far. In your mind, who do you think has had the best performance as far as a head coach? I know we have like Shane Steichen, Todd Bowles doing an incredible job as well, Dan Campbell, but who is your early coach of the year?
It's probably not the sexiest pick, and it's probably a pretty obvious one, but the fact that the 4-13 Patriots have already beat their win total from last year and they're on a 5 game winning streak, this team has automatically returned back the clock from what we saw in the 2000s Patriots. So I have to give it to them. The fact that they turned around what was one of the worst teams in the league and now they look like they could potentially be the 1 seed or at least would be the division winners. The complete overhaul for this team, you have Drake May in the MVP conversation. Their defense is playing great. You're turning back the clock with Stephon Diggs. I got to give it to Mike Vrabel so far.
Yeah, Mike Vrabel, that's definitely a good pick. For me, I have to go with Todd Bowles, especially with this Tampa Bay Buccaneers team dealing with so many injuries. He's also gotten 2 offensive coordinators hired, which I think is a big deal, especially for him. And then just being able to keep the team afloat, keep the team focused. And now you're carrying on the mantle from Bruce Arians and Tom Brady and continuing to just remain at the top of your division. It's really impressive what Tampa has done this year, especially with all of the injuries that they've endured. And they've been a legitimate, just favorite, solid playoff team that could potentially mess around and make it to a Super Bowl if they're healthy.
Yeah, I would agree. Other teams I would shout out, like we talked about Shane Steichen a little bit, 7-1, exceeding expectations. That guy definitely deserves some Coach of the Year votes. And then we had talked about it when we previewed the Lions' grades, but Dan Campbell, with his entire head coaching staff, basically going to other teams, whether it be the Jets or Bears, they've been exceptional. Hasn't missed a beat. Their offense is still exceptional. And I think just the fact that he's missed out on so many other Coach of the Year awards when he's been able to turn around what this Lions franchise has become, becoming what was the perpetual losers into a perennial playoff team. So I think if you're going to give a guy a award retrospectively, I think Dan Campbell also deserves some votes.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Dan Campbell is also my number 2, so if we're using ranked choice voting, then he would be the coach of the year.
Yeah. So coach of the year. Now MVP is a little tricky because I think there's definitely some guys deserving already, whether it's Mahomes, whether it's Drake May or whoever. My early MVP favorite, just because of the way he's elevated this team to new heights, what I didn't believe to be. We haven't seen a running back win since Adrian Peterson, but I think it's Jonathan Taylor. He's on pace to have over 2,200 scrimmage yards. He already has 13 touchdowns. He could have potentially LT numbers, who got some MVP votes when he had his year in 2006. He is single handedly carrying this Colts team. And Daniel Jones has played great. I'll give credit to him, but really, he's been the catalyst of that offense, scoring three consecutive games with three straight touchdowns. I feel like he's got to be the MVP in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaging almost 6 yards a carry at this point. So you give him the ball twice and then you're getting a first down. If you're Daniel Jones, that makes your job so much easier. And he definitely is the most valuable player for the Colts because if Jonathan Taylor goes down, this would be a very different team. And you're potentially seeing a 6-1 team fall to 4-3 or potentially you're 500. So I definitely agree with it. We had our finger on that pulse last week, and now everyone in the NFL caught up to this show and they're putting Jonathan Taylor in that conversation. And I am just sick of seeing quarterbacks win the MVP year in and year out. So I do definitely think that Jonathan Taylor is the most valuable player.
Yeah, I mean, another person I would put below him, just barely, is Drake May. Mahomes has had a great season, but I feel like there's going to be voter fatigue. So if I'm making my prediction based on that, Jonathan Taylor and Drake May have the narrative that you would want. Drake May, he's leading the league in completion percentage. He's fourth in passing. He's 15 touchdowns, two picks. Like he's played exceptional, and he's made the Patriots from a dumpster fire organization for the last 3 years to being right there in the mix. So I feel like it's got to be Jonathan Taylor or Drake May.
Yeah, and Mahomes might not even win his division. So we'll see.
Yeah. But MVP, are you also leaning Jonathan Taylor for MVP?
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor would be my MVP right now. Number 2, I would definitely put Drake May up there, especially with the expectations for this team. He's in year 2. So those would be my 2.
All right. And then defensive player of the year. I feel right now the betting on favorites is Micah Parsons, and I feel like he'll probably get it just for the narrative alone. But if I'm going to give my defensive player of the year, for the sake that the Lions, with all the struggles that they've had defensively over the past few years, Aiden Hutchinson was due for the defensive player of the year last year, and now he's leading this Lions team who has allowed the fourth fewest passing yards and fourth fewest rushing yards in this game. They have a top 10 defense right now, and he's the catalyst of that defense. I'm giving my defensive player of the year to Aiden Hutchinson.
Yeah, in Hutchinson, definitely a good choice. But for me right now, gonna go with the team at the top of their division in the West. How about Nick Bonito with 9 sacks right now? And I think the two players above him, you have Miles Garrett and Brian Burns, but Brian Burns dealing with the injury right now, and then Miles Garrett. Can you win Defensive Player of the Year if your team finishes with 4 wins? I don't really think so. So I think Nick Bonito, if you're going to give the Broncos an award just for being potentially 12-5 or 13-4, I think he's going to be someone who gets a shout out.
Yeah. And then offensive player of the year, to end it out. We'll see if you want to cover rookies, but offensive player of the year, I feel like if you're going to give Jonathan Taylor the MVP, he's probably a shoe-in for offensive player of the year. But another guy I would shout out, just because even though he might have missed a game, he's banged up a little bit, but Puka Nakoa, for what he's on track to be, he could potentially have 2,000 yards. But the way that Matthew Stafford's been feeding him, he's another guy that I can see as a potential offensive player of the year candidate.
Yeah, him, and then also just for the narrative as well, especially losing a big wide receiver. How about Jackson Smith and Jigba leading the league right now as far as receiving yards, and then him and Sam Darnold just hooking up, and they have like 2 or 3 big plays each game. So been really impressed just to see him take that next step. And it's great to see, a wide receiver who not a lot of people knew about. They kind of heard his name, like, oh, Smith and Jigba. I know that guy in fantasy, I guess. And then this year, like, whoa, okay, that's the guy. So really happy to see him take over in Seattle.
Yeah, he's been exceptional. You said he's leading the league in receiving yards. He's been exceptional. Part of the reason why the Seahawks have been as good as they are. He's deserving. It would be strange to see Jonathan Taylor not win it because we don't. I don't imagine he's going to win MVP, sadly. But I think those three guys are the three-headed monster for Offensive Player of the Year so far.
Yeah, and then you'd have to look at someone like Jamar Chase as well if Joe Flacco's going to keep feeding him.
If he's going to get 20 targets a game, he could very well be Offensive Player of the Year. He might end up with 170 catches at this point. So, and then rookies, early rookie shout outs for me. I think Mbuka should probably win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Jackson Dart, he's a good story, but I feel like Mbuka has been a better receiver than Jackson Dart has been a quarterback. The storyline is fun with them, but Mbuka, he stepped in and been a top 20 receiver in the league so far. Where Jackson Dart, he's been fun, but I don't know if he's necessarily Offensive Rookie of the Year quite yet, especially with the stats.
Yeah, I'd say Emeka Ibuka. Also, shout out Bo Nix because I feel like for a guy who spent 7 years in college, why don't we say that by the time he reaches year three, that's when he'd finish his rookie season in college years?
Yeah, yeah, I like it there. And then Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'll probably give it to Abdul Carter. That Giants defense has been exceptional with him, Brian Burns, and Bobby Okereke. So he would be my Defensive Rookie of the Year so far.
Yeah, I like Brian Burns a lot, especially with Carlos Dunlap, and he's really been able to elevate that defense for them that already had great players. So I'd go Dunlap as well.
All right, and that is our mid-season awards. So we've been covered for the grades. We've recapped week 8. We're past the first half of the season. We now enter week 9. So I'm going to get the standings and games ahead of us for Thursday night football. We start out here Ravens and Dolphins, and Ravens have the return of none other than Mr. Lamar Jackson, primetime himself, and they are favored at 7.5 on the road in Miami. The return of Lamar Jackson means I will be taking the Ravens to get the win against the Dolphins.
Yeah, I'll take the Ravens as well, but I do think this is going to be a good game, especially with the Ravens defense being a little bit shaky. So I do think we'll have Jalen Waddle show out a little bit.